Here's the issue is I don't think anybody has an answer for that. Nobody here in Washington seems to have that answer. Nobody in Tel Aviv seems to have that answer. Every time we hear an answer, it could be, an end in the obliteration of the nuclear program. It could be the end of the ICBM program. And then within the past 36 to 48 hours after the attack started, it now becomes regime change. And we've seen the result of that. The problem with the U.S. policy here is no different than the U.S. policy they've had previously. Is there doesn't seem to be a solution for the end game. And until we know what the end game is, until we know exactly what we're to expect, I think that question being kind of left unanswered is a big threat to the region. Well, if we listen to the comments of President Trump from earlier, it would be in probably the next 10 to 14 days. President Trump has already stated that this will probably go on for another week. So we're probably looking at, by Friday this time, we might see a reduction in the hostilities going. But that also depends on what the leadership in Tehran does. There's a possibility of a vacuum. We hear that al-Raji is the new kind of de facto head of Iran since the death of Ayatollah Khamenei. But we still don't know who exactly is calling the shots. Is it the IRGC? Is it somebody in the presidential council? And we've even heard as soon as 20 minutes ago, President Trump is saying now the Iranians want to have discussions. Again, we're not getting clear messages, and that's, I think, what's got everybody a little on edge right now. Well, I mean, if the question is, are they going to leave NATO? The simple answer is no. They're not going to leave NATO over this. What I will say is, though, that there is a definite messaging problem between Washington and our NATO and European allies. If we look globally, we've seen Canada and Australia pretty much come in full support of the U.S. action against Iran. When we get into the NATO countries, when we get into Europe, those countries that could be accessible by a ballistic missile out of Iran, they seem to be a little more hesitant. We're seeing that from Macron in France. We're seeing that from Merz in Germany, and even Keir Starmer. So, I don't think that this is going to destroy any alliances, but Washington is going to have to patch up the relationships after this. And again, let's also be clear. It also depends on what the end result here is. If we start seeing prolonged loss of civilian lives at the hand of Iran ballistic missiles, or we start seeing an expansion of conflict into places like Iraq. There in Erbil, we've already seen possible proxy attacks there at the airbase. If we see that, that's going to be a backflash and a possible risk for Washington in this whole endeavor. Well, look, the new government in Baghdad has an opportunity here. They can pretty much drive their own destiny, and it's going to require a coalition. Does that coalition include President Barzani and the Kurdish regional government? Do they have a say in what the future of Iraq looks like? Does the new government in Baghdad represent a government for all Iraqis? Kind of the message we saw out of President al-Shara in Syria. The underlying question regarding that is Iraq could either play a key role in providing stability and security in that part of the world, or the proxies could take full advantage of the instability or the unknown. Those proxies could cause enough harm to whereas it could shift the power from Baghdad directly to Tehran. Either answer there does not bode well for our allies in Syria, and particularly does not bode well for our partners there in Erbil in the Kurdish region. Well, I think that that was always going to be a possibility for the British Ministry of Defense. They've always been an ally. They've always been supportive of U.S. operations in the region. Even with the verbal hesitancy or the call for restraint coming out of number 10 Downing Street and Prime Minister Keir Starmer's administration, what we're seeing is also a willingness to protect our allies in the region. What we saw yesterday, for example, was a statement from the British Ministry of Defense that pretty much championed the fact that their joint fighter wing in Doha, in conjunction with the Qatari armed forces, they help they help defend Qatari sovereign airspace against the UAVs. That was something that the Ministry of Defense in London put out, not from the MOD in Doha, which they were talking about. Well, the United Kingdom is going to defend itself. If there is any sort of loss of life by British forces in this attack by the Iranians against Cyprus, then the Brits will defend themselves and they will take an active participation in defending their interests. Regarding the rest of the Middle East, the issue then becomes who is calling the shots. We heard the Iranian foreign minister give a talk to NBC News earlier, where he made statements basically saying that the IRGC and key strategic military units were operating, as he put it, independently. If they're operating independently, the question then becomes who's in charge? Who's calling the shots in Tehran? Is it the IRGC? Is it Larijani? Is it somebody else that we don't know? The information vacuum that's happening and the power vacuum that could result from this makes it very hard for the allies to truly come up with an end game plan that will make this a successful operation, that will minimize destruction, that will minimize the loss of innocent lives, and possibly, hopefully, come up with a mediated solution that could see a peaceful end to military operations. Again, like, this is the same answer that we keep saying. We don't know what the objective of Iran is. Iran has said previously that they want the ability to defend themselves. Thus, the reason for the ICBM program. They want ballistic missiles to protect their sovereignty. When a outside power starts coming in and regulating how big or how strong those missiles are, that calls into question their ability to govern themselves. So they've got heartburn with that. When you talk about the nuclear program, they keep saying that they want it for a peaceful nuclear program. Well, let's be clear. You don't need highly enriched uranium to run X-rays at a medical center in Tehran. The bigger question here, and quite frankly, the biggest threat to regional and U.S. Security strategy in the entire globe is the idea of the proxies. If Iran does not control its use of proxies, if it does not control how the proxies act in their stead, then there's going to continue to be problems. The bottom line here is that the world is saying to Iran, look, if you want to be part of the global community, if you want to be able to have the ability to govern your destiny, you're going to have to play by certain rules. And that means you cannot have proxies starting wars, starting military skirmishes, provoking international conflict, and expect there not to be repercussions. So, again, back to your original question, what is the end goal? Until we know who's in charge, I don't think we're going to see an answer to what that end goal is. Because one of the things that we also have to realize is the U.S. has created a dozen or so brand new martyrs for Iran that's going to get the Shia people really worked up, and they're going to want to see vengeance. Look, let's be clear. If they want to justify it by attacking U.S. forces, they can attack U.S. forces. However, when they start attacking civilian infrastructure, when they start attacking civilian targets, such as we've seen in the UAE, such as we've seen in Manama in Bahrain, as we saw earlier in the video coming out of Doha, Qatar. These are not military targets. These are not U.S. targets. The reality is that Iran is not going to make a lot of friends or garner a lot of support in the Gulf or in the Arab world by targeting civilian targets and causing the loss of innocent lives inside these Arab countries, including the Gulf states. So, there's going to have to be some restraint. Iran does have, according to them and according to UN Charter, the right to defend themselves. But the second they start going off the rails, the second they start targeting civilian and non-U.S. military, that's outside the boundaries of acceptable behavior. And there's a strong possibility that the Iranians could pay for that.